This is Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and it is one of my favorite RPGs of all time. It's my most played game on Switch, and I have run all of these dungeons so many times. There are so many things to love about this game, but one of my favorite aspects of it has to come from its level design. I love almost every dungeon in this game. They're all both visually and mechanically interesting and distinct from one another, and I could probably make an essay on any of them, which made choosing which one to write an essay on actually a bit difficult. Really though, the more I thought about it, the game's two shining stars definitely came down to its last regular dungeon, Rabbana Terra, and its first dungeon, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. So, without any further ado, this is the level design of the River Belle Path. First and foremost, let's walk through the River Belle Path together so we get a feel for the dungeon's layout. When you start your journey down the River Belle, you find yourself in this little T-shaped alcove and things start off pretty standard. To your right, you can find this neat little drawbridge that we can only lower one half of, and to your left, you find yourself in a simple grassy field with a light scattering of goblins. They're easy enough to dispatch, and then you find yourself with the ability to walk down to our titular river itself, as you find this nice little chest with a cure stone inside. Heading up a little ways, there's a gate and a goblin with a key, and after beating it, we load up the key and open the gate. Now, we've already seen an important part of this dungeon that needs to be pointed out, and that's the fact that we can't enter the water of the River Belle. We can get right up down to the edge of the river, but we can't swim. When you can swim, the entire dungeon falls apart, and I'm not even speaking hypothetically. Echoes of Time, which I don't have any footage of, sorry, does let you swim in the river, and it actually ruins the whole thing. We'll come back to why this is important later, but just remember that it is. Continuing through the gate, we cross a bridge to a fight, which drops a key to head down the required path, but we also find our first real optional path. If we head in the opposite direction of the gate, we can walk down by the shore to find ourselves on the other side of that drawbridge from earlier. Here, there's another fight, and the quick jaunt through a shaded hill up to a chest containing an artifact. The hidden Moogle room is up here too. There's one of those in every dungeon. The artifacts are basically the main important drop in most dungeons. As long as you get all the artifacts, by and large, most people consider that dungeon to be a full clear. Back on the main path, we head through the gate we opened earlier, fight a few more enemies, and come to this fork in the road. To the right, there are some treasure chests on a hill, and to the left is a broken bridge. This is one part of the level that I've always found really fun, because to continue from here, we actually need to walk down the broken bridge to the shoreline on the other side of the river. The shoreline will bring us back to another field. Nearby, we find an optional chest, then we can cross one more bridge and head right to find a Moogle house. The Moogle house isn't actually functional, but I think it's neat that it's here. If we instead head left, we find the boss, fight a giant crab, and complete our objective by collecting a drop of myrrh. And that's the River Belle. So, what about this dungeon do I find to be so great? First and foremost, let's just talk about the visual design. The River Belle, as most dungeons in this game do, makes an effort to keep the feel of the area evolving but consistent. We go from walking along rolling fields to walking along the shoreline to crossing bridges and opening gates. As mentioned before, walking over the collapsed bridge halfway through the level is particularly fun for me because it really adds to this feeling that this path is disused and a little dangerous. There aren't people stopping by to patch up these bridges. While some bits of this dungeon might feel like other bits of this dungeon as you're going through it, the dungeon makes sure to differentiate it from itself. You shouldn't feel like you're walking through the same room repeatedly too much. There are a lot of ways to do this too. Even if the atmosphere itself needs to be a little more samey, you could instead differentiate things by changing up the geography. Take a look here at how Mount Kalanda has us originally walking down these pretty narrow linear pathways before opening up with this big sprawling network of paths in its second half. This idea of making sure various parts of the dungeon feel distinct and unique from each other is important. When too much of the dungeon blends together, it all starts to feel a little blah. Even if it was cool and exciting at first, when we get too much of it, we're just kind of over it. The second big thing is the river itself. Anyone running through this dungeon and paying attention to their surroundings will be quick to catch on to the fact that we're constantly heading upstream. We are, in the broad strokes, following the river. This helps us orient ourselves and constantly feel like we're making forward progress. We know we're heading somewhere, and even if you're not paying that much attention to the environment, you'll probably feel that even subconsciously. If you were to compare that instead to one of these levels in Noctuary, a game that, to be clear, is absolutely fantastic. I love this game. Do not take this as me hating on Noctuary. But as you can see, as I walk down these somewhat generic forest paths, that there's no clear sense of direction. These are just hallways with some vague destination. And some Crystal Chronicles dungeons fall victim to this vague destination trap too, but many of its dungeons use these central landmarks so well. Like, you might load into River and see this big honking temple in front of you and think, wow, I want to go there. So you climb the steps and find the door locked, but look, there's a button on the roof. Let's find a way to that button, and it feels great when you finally do. But it's also more than that, because while we are following the general path of the River Belle, we're not just mindlessly following the river, and this is why I say it's important that we can't swim. The River Belle isn't just a central landmark guiding our way, but also a wall that cuts the dungeon in half. We start out on the left side of the river and need to find a way to the right side, then when we are on the right side and the way forward is back on the left. There's this wonderful zigzag going on as we explore these fields and riverbanks. The river acts as a general guidepost, but it's not a dotted line on the floor that tell us the exact route. We still need to poke around and find our own way. Which brings us to the third thing. Remember this optional path, where we walk down to the riverbank and find this path leading to a chest? Optional paths like this always elevate a dungeon, I think, as long as they're actually worth trotting. They reward exploration, and when they have good rewards in them, they also encourage not just rushing to the end of the dungeon as fast as you can, which is a mindset that I personally, at least, never enjoy all that much. And one thing to note about this optional path is its size. One thing a lot of optional paths do, I find, is to be too darn small. You find the secret room, and it's just that, a single room, which can still feel fun every now and then, but I think having a full optional path here just makes it that much more fun. It's not just a simple, I walked the wrong way and here's a reward, it's you actually dedicating yourself to exploring this optional path, almost like finding a mini dungeon inside the dungeon. It makes you feel like you actually worked for this reward at the end. On top of that, this optional path goes hand in hand with the previous point about the river. When you pick up on the idea that we're following the river, this means when we find a path that doesn't follow the river, we know there are probably some optional goodies down there. The River Belle is really just wonderful. I love this dungeon, and I think there was no better way to start off this game. Between keeping the dungeon varied as we progress forward, having a central landmark to always orient ourselves against and provide us with a clear destination, and having a decent amount of optional goodies to find, this dungeon just checks all the boxes for me. And it's not alone. So many of this game's dungeons are so very good, for many of the same reasons. River centers you around this big temple, and you navigate the dungeon in a big C shape through the back streets to find a way up to it. Damon's Court is all about finding 2 keys scattered around this camp to open a gate you see right at the beginning. Tita introduces these spider webs about halfway through the dungeon to keep things varied, and so on and so forth. But that's all from me. Thank you for watching. Except actually, wait a second. Look at this gate and this drawbridge. These are really weird. They're these shortcuts back to earlier parts of the dungeon, but there's literally no reason to go back. I don't know why these are here. No other dungeon in the game really does this. It makes me wonder if this game was maybe originally designed to not have these dungeons that you select from a world map, but instead some sort of interconnected map or something. I don't really have anything to say about these. I just thought it was a neat little detail to point out. Okay, I'm actually done now. Goodbye.